Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff event for our Friday Friends Real Talk. I'm Hillary Martin-Lay. I'm the chairman of the Friends of Greenwich Library, and I'm very excited to be joined tonight by Tracy Heather Strain, who is to talk about her documentary, Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart. Before we begin, I wanted to mention that the Friends have sponsored the Friday Film Series at Greenwich Library for nearly 70 years. This popular series was curated for decades by Wayne Campbell, and on his retirement, we closed the Cole Auditorium. And now, as part of our Reimagine, Repurpose campaign, we are building a brand new state-of-the-art theater, which when we reopen, we restart our wonderful Friday Film Series will be in our new Berkeley Theater. But in this, until we can meet in person, the Friday Film Series will be a virtual series. The committee has selected films for our virtual series that patrons can access for free of charge through one of our online platforms that you can access through the library website. These films are available for no charge, and we hope you will take advantage of that. The films that we have selected for this series have a theme of community. Once a month, we will bring a special outside speaker to speak with us about the film, and we will have a conversation with them. And as a matter of form, our conversation will take about 45 minutes, and then we will welcome questions from the audience. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our guest this evening, Tracy Heather Strain. Tracy is the co-founder of the Film Posse, an award-winning film production company in Middletown, Connecticut. She is also a professor of film studies at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. And we are going to be talking about Tracy's documentary, Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart, which this film premiered in the 2017 Toronto Film Festival. It's also appeared on the PBS American Masters series. So Tracy, welcome to our very first Friday Films Real Talk.
Hi, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
So we have a bunch of questions for you, and we're delighted that you're here. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, tell us a little bit about the genesis of this project.
Sure. I had been interested in Lorraine Hansberry since I was about 17. So even before I went to college. And it's because my grandmother took my sister and I to see a play in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up, called To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. And so this was like 1978. And To Be Young, Gifted, and Black is a play about Lorraine Hansberry's life that was put together after she died by her ex-husband and some other people, including one of our executive producers. And I was really stunned to be introduced to this young Black woman because, you know, for those of us that are old enough to remember, you didn't see a lot of African Americans on television or on stages and on movies. And so here was this young voice with all these strong opinions and thoughts, and some of the things that she discussed were things I'd thought about or I'd wondered about, and it was just really inspiring. And I kind of paraphrase something that she says later in her life, that when she saw the play Juno and the Paycock, she said it entered her consciousness and stayed there. Well, for me, Lorraine Hansberry at that time entered my consciousness and stayed there, but she kind of went to the back. Yeah? And then when I was in college, I was an American Studies major, and oddly, I didn't even think about her during that time. It wasn't until later, after I was working, and I was seeing a lot of independent films, and I had this idea that there should be a film about Lorraine Hansberry. Even though I didn't work in the film business at the time, I was working in advertising and direct marketing. And I actually left that field and started at the bottom in film production at a documentary company. I actually didn't think I was the plan wasn't to make a documentary originally about her, it was to make a feature film, because I had seen about Frances Farmer, and I was like, Lorraine Hansberry should have a story like that.
Wow. Well, tell me, how did you do all of the research by yourself, or was it a team effort? I know that your husband is also a documentary filmmaker. Did you work together? What were the hurdles you faced in terms of putting all this information together?
So yes, I worked with a team, but initially I did research on my own, and I did some of that research very early, even before I left advertising. I would sit in the Boston Public Library. I'm a big library fan, by the way. And I started reading about her. And so I started collecting notes back then. And then, yes, these kinds of documentaries are done with a team. So I did work. Various people over the years did research on our behalf. We traveled to archives. We called archives. We started this project at a time when material wasn't digitized and available online like it is now. So we had to go to a lot of places and literally go through piles of photographs and documents ourselves. So there were a lot of hurdles. I think the biggest hurdle for us was fundraising. It was really hard to raise money for this project. It took 14 years to get done because of fundraising.
Where was your seed financing come from?
Us.
Many filmmakers.
Anytime we worked. So the way we stay alive is we've been blessed to do some of the American Experience films. So we would get commission co-productions from WGBH, which is actually, they've just changed to just GBH. And, if there was any money made from those that we were able to keep, it went right into Hansberry, and we didn't take vacations. We didn't have time off. Even while we were working on those films for American Experience, sometimes we were in shoots and we'd go back to the hotel room and work on a proposal or get something else done for the Hansberry project. It really consumed our lives. At one point, my mom was kind of like, I can't wait till you get done. I used to joke that she was like, as soon as I said the word Hansberry, she was like, la 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 la.
It was really a labor of love.
Yeah, it was hard. But yeah, I've been, blessed that people have responded so favorably, mostly.
Let me ask you, did you find that you got more from your research, archival research, or from your interviews that you had for the documentary?
It was a mixture. So there's someone working on a big biography of Lorraine Hansberry, and she's been working on it for a very long time, since the 80s, I believe, and hopefully it will come out soon. Although a book by Amiri Baraka has come out, that book will not, this forthcoming book will have even more information in it. And I tell you that because there was no major biography about Lorraine Hansberry for me to go to find out deeper stories. There were books about Lorraine Hansberry, but many of them were superficial. There were some tailored to young people. And so a lot of them didn't get into the depth that we were looking for. So we had to rely on primary sources, archival primary sources. We read every footnote in every book and article that we read to go back to originals. When people in books mentioned that there might have been a photographer or camera, we would try to track that down. But we went out and did the interviews that we did, having done as much research on each individual as we could find. But every interview, I was learning brand new things that aren't in anybody's book. They're nowhere else. And so I would say that those stories are just as important as the archival material we were able to find. In fact, maybe some of those stories are more important because they led us to more archival material.
You had such a wide range of really fascinating interviews. Who was the most difficult one to get? Or some of them were not well-known people, but some of them were obviously like Harry Belafonte, very famous. So what was the most difficult interview for you?
It was difficult. It took 7 years for Sidney Poitier to say yes. So that was the most difficult. And I was in the train station in South Station, Boston. And I got a phone call out of the blue. It was his assistant. We've agreed to do an interview with you. And I was, super excited. And then she said, we can give you 15 minutes on such and such a date. And I was like, what? Because I have, of course, more than 15 minutes worth of questions. But I figured that meant that as long as we were doing okay and he wasn't annoyed, that we would get a real interview. And that's exactly what happened. He was really happy. I stopped the interview before he did. So it was really great. And I still can't believe it. I had a conversation with Sidney Poitier and I made him cry.
I also was so struck that you had a huge amount of archival material. It was photographs, home movie footage, images from her journals, images also of the Great Migration, of the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg trial. I mean, it was just this vast array of information. How did you find your through line with all this and map it all out?
So the key to any media presentation like this is finding your story. And I knew there were a couple of things that I knew. Most people, if they'd heard of Lorraine Hansberry, they didn't really know anything about her. They maybe knew about A Raisin in the Sun. There were some people that knew about A Raisin in the Sun and maybe knew her family had been well off. And so they assumed certain things about her. I like to say that there's a photo of her where she has pearls on and a really nice dress. Her hair's done up. And I feel like people projected an image on her, especially those who knew that, she came from a family that was well off. And I sort of describe it as she embodied in their minds, success, Black success in the middle of the civil rights movement. Like she was this icon that was put on a pedestal and wasn't a person. So I knew that. And I knew that she was a lot more radical and just very different than people knew. And so with that in mind, I was saying, well, what story should I tell of this person that people don't know? And I felt the most effective story to tell was the story of her as an artist activist. It seemed to be, it bore out. Like people said, I never knew she was such an activist. People have been really surprised about that. Because A Raisin in the Sun also is often taught as this sort of sanitized play. It's about the American dreams and this aspiring Black family. And sometimes people even got confused, when they would write about it, because we would get Google alerts whenever A Raisin in the Sun or Lorraine Hansberry was in the news. And one described the play as a Black family who wanted to move into a white neighborhood. I mean, that wasn't what the play was about, but it's just, it just got reduced to something more simple and she as well. So that's what it was. But once I figured that out, it's like, so you kind of look for a structure, what does she want? Well, she wants to change the world. We decided, I have all these notebooks with notes over the years that I scribbled in ideas and thoughts and things, but I finally came to this conclusion that this is someone who really thought she could help change the world with her mind, her thoughts, and then settled on art. Art would be the vehicle for her. And so we wanted to tell that journey of someone who was trying to use art to change the world. Literally how we organize the material was we have a database. We use a FileMaker, a custom FileMaker database, and we keep track of everything. We have about 7,000 entries of information, 2,700 entries for archival footage and sound. We have thousands of photos. So we have a system, because we make mostly historical documentaries, and that we've been using for other projects. And that's how we keep track of everything. And so that we can know who the rights holder is. And if a photo is available in different places, which one is the most cost-effective place to get it, or who has the best resolution, things like that.
What was the thing that surprised you the most about Hansberry as you got to know her, as you read about her life and really dug into her story?
Yeah, I remember the first time I was asked this question, and I really found it a challenging question to answer, because I think it took so long to make the film that I kind of had forgotten what was new to me. And this is going to sound really kind of superficial, but I was really surprised to learn that she had been previously engaged. I had no idea. That was like completely new information. She was engaged to an activist. There's a photograph of him in the film. He's speaking by an American flag. It's a still photograph. And also she's walking with him on a protest line. And she had this amazing breakup with him. It was like it was an awesome Dear John letter, but we couldn't get it in the film. We had a 4-hour rough cut of the film, and we showed it to our advisors. And it's the first time that I've worked on a project when I've asked advisors, what can we take out? Because we have to bring it down to under 2 hours. And nobody had any suggestions for us, because there were so many interesting stories that, aren't often in films, or they'd never heard before. And that's one of the stories that had to go, about her being previously married.
That'll be in the book, I'm sure. What do you think is the biggest misconception about Hansberry?
I think the biggest misconception is what I had mentioned before, which is that she was a mild-mannered integrationist. Yeah. And she was a radical activist who wanted the country to live up to its ideals, and was a strong woman who spoke her mind. She had no problem sitting there talking to the Attorney General, saying what she thought. And it's amazing to think that she had such poise and self-assuredness, that she was operating in mid-20th century America as if she had the right and to do whatever she wanted, and she did. For the most part. Of course, part of her life was secret.
Right. That was a huge surprise to me, that whole secret part of her life, that private part of her life.
That had been, that was in a book that was published in 1991. That's where I first learned about it. And it was talked about a lot on the internet. So that wasn't a surprise to us. I think it's been surprising to people that we included it in the film. Some people were just so happy that we did, because they thought for sure a film like this, we wouldn't put it in. And so we wanted to tell the whole story of, as much as you can in a film, of what she was dealing with in her life. And we thought it was an interesting contrast, because she was so forthright and public about so many things. And then she had this other part of life that added another layer of stress that she had to keep secret. So, which
we're talking about her life, that she had
that she was lesbian.
Yeah, she had a lesbian relationships. So let's ask a couple of questions, putting you on the hot seat of thinking of her in today's terms. What role, she died so young. I mean, she died at 34 years old, which seems just possibly unfair for such a gifted person. Mm-hmm. What role do you think Lorraine Hansen would have played in, or thought about today's social justice movement?
Well, I think she'd be happy. I think she'd be disappointed that people would still be having the same conversations. Yeah. But I think she'd be very pleased that young people were out there protesting and pushing for change. She admired the young people during her day, and they weren't that much younger than she was. So I think she'd be quite supportive. She was born in 1930, so I don't think necessarily she'd be out on the front lines, given that there's a pandemic. But Yeah, but I'm sure she would have
Hear it.
had lots to say.
What do you think she would think about films and theater right now?
Hmm. I think she'd have, similar feelings that she would feel similarly as she did in the past. However, I think she'd be happy that progress was made, that there's more makers of color telling stories, not only about experiences about people that look similar to them, but about people, they're just getting more opportunities overall. But I do think there's still a lot of issues in our industry. And so I think she would still be advocating for change. And but yeah, of course, I think she would see progress and be happy with that.
Are there any other playwrights that are active right now that you think compare to Lorraine Hansberry in terms of sort of capturing the moment?
So theater, I'm not such a theater person. I think that um, she I think she's really unique. And I say this because she was so grounded in movement work. She had studied, she'd been an activist, and she studied activism, and she wrote for a lot of publications that were on the left. And then she decided that she wanted to learn theater. So she taught herself theater, and was trying to work out how to make good art but still get her activist, her protest message in her work. And so there I see I the little bit I know about theater directors and writers, I see aspects of her in different people. So that's one reason we interviewed Lynn Nottage, because we thought Lynn Nottage was a great person to sort of be a surrogate, a guide, because Lynn Nottage has also written plays about the African American experience, but she's also written plays about people who were white and other backgrounds, and she's had to deal with similar issues that Lorraine Hansberry faced when her play The Sign in Sidney Brustein's Window came out. But yeah, so theater's not my area. Sometimes lately I feel like Zoom's my only area.
I think we all can relate to that, actually. If you were, now this is another left field question here. If you were producing a remake of Raisin in the Sun today, how would it be different?
Well, it's interesting. So people have done remakes recently. There was one by Kenny Leon that came out in 2004 or 5, around there. And I think that, yeah, how would it be different? I don't know. I feel like sometimes I feel like I wouldn't want to mess with like something that's great. I've seen a lot of stage productions of A Raisin in the Sun, and people have tried all sorts of things to be innovative. And most of them I didn't find effective, because I felt like it took you out of the story and made you sort of notice the device. So like one had Walter Lee and his wife. It was on a revolving stage, and they were in their bedroom together, like about to make love, and so just different things. And that same production had a sort of dead Walter, the mother's late husband, kind of appear as a ghost, sort of in. Yeah, I don't think I'd mess with it. Of course, I'd find contemporary actors and actresses. Maybe I could set it in a place on the south side of Chicago that was more contemporary. Maybe that's the main issue. Because I think that most of the issues that exist are similar. Maybe you could instead of making Walter Lee a chauffeur, maybe he's an Uber driver, maybe little things like that.
Do you have any how would you cast it if you were in charge of casting?
Yeah, so I make documentaries, so I don't think
Yeah.
about actors and actresses a whole lot. But I think I would try to, maybe someone like Janelle Monáe would be a good, maybe Benitha or Ruth. Actually, maybe she could be Ruth, and Yara Shahidi could be Benitha. And I think she'd be a good Benitha. Yeah, I'd have to give it that even more thought, but I think there'd be some great actors and that could play in the roles. But I don't know who would play Ruth, play Walter Lee or the mother.
Yeah, those are tough. They're wonderful roles, though.
Yes, yeah.
Well, let me ask you a few questions about yourself and your career. Can you tell me what you think are the biggest challenge to making and producing quality documentaries right now? And we've talked that money is probably a huge issue, but beyond just the money, what are the issues that are really the hurdles?
That's the main hurdle, because money can buy you time to do more research. Money can buy you time to collect more. It gives you time to think more. It can allow you to attract, collaborators. People. You need to pay the people who collaborate on your projects, and so you can have a longer timeline to get some things done if you have enough money. Because the thing is, with the money you have and time, with the money buys time, it allows you to not have to rush through the project. So if maybe you're having trouble tracking down somebody or their schedules aren't quite in line, you have the time to maybe put it off and try again later to see if you can get so-and-so to be in your film. So if we had finished our film, earlier, I mean, we had an extended timeline, not by choice, Mr. Poitier wouldn't have been in our film, right? Because he said no so many times. He's very he's cautious about what he's involved in. Music, like our film cost over $1.5 million to make. $300,000 of that were rights. And we even had about 270 some fair use claims. And so, which means that, we were claiming that we could put this in the film because of different conditions and we didn't have to pay to use them. And you have to have a lawyer to, look through that. So we had to, you have to pay the lawyer. But the clips of A Raisin in the Sun alone cost over $50,000 that you see in the film. So in the field right now, the two biggest issues are sustainability, like trying to sustain a career, which is related to money, and issues of equity and diversity. Those are the big ones. I feel like everything else can kind of work itself out. I mean, there's lots of stories out there to tell, and trying to develop them, each of them, requires resources.
Do you have a favorite movie?
I don't, actually.
Your favorite documentary?
Nope.
Everything, try everything new.
Yeah, and this interesting thing is because I've been teaching for, I guess this is my 8th year teaching documentary production, but it's only my 2nd year teaching documentary history and storytelling specifically. And so I've been watching lots and lots of documentaries, and I am inspired by each one in different ways. So every time I see a new one, I'm like, oh, I love that. I love this. I love that. So right now I feel like my head's being jerked around, so no favorites right now.
Well, I understand you have a new project and that you're working on about L. Frank Baum. And would you like to tell us a little bit about your new project? And it's quite a pivot from Lorraine Hansberry.
So this is another film that's a commission co-production with GBH in Boston, and it's for the American Experience series. And hopefully we'll be able to finish it soon so that it will be on the air next year. like everybody else's productions this year, we were stopped in March because of COVID. We had timed it very strategically to do all our interviews during our spring break from Wesleyan. And we started with interviews in Boston, knowing that California was already shutting down by the time we got there in March. And so we got 4 interviews done, and in the Boston area, and a couple more in Connecticut. And then we were stopped for a while. And then since places started reopening and production was allowed again, we've been doing remote interviews via Zoom. And so the camera person and sometimes the camera and sound person goes to the location. They send us the camera feed through Zoom, and the person sees us through a laptop. So it's been quite an interesting process and a very different process, but we've gotten some really great interviews about Baum's life. It's a film that talks about his life and him as a representative of a time in American society. And, it's a very challenging story because his wife burned their papers after he died. So it's challenge. I can't do the same kind of inner story. I'm co-directing with Randy, my husband. We can't do the same kind of inner story that we could do with Lorraine Hansberry, because not only did her ex-husband save her papers, but he had people send in their papers. So we had the benefit of seeing things that she wrote to others and what she also what they wrote to her. So with Baum, we just have some things that collectors have saved. He's fascinating because he just tried so many different things, and he got bored with them, and he just kept changing. I mean, he raised chickens. He bred chickens for a while. As a kid, he had a printing press. He moved out to Aberdeen. He opened a crazy store called Baum's Bazaar, selling this is the 1800s. He's selling fancy goods, like imported things, thinking that, Aberdeen is going to be like the next Chicago. It's a town, it's a railroad town at the crossroad. They called it Hub City, and it's surrounded by farms. So a drought came and failed. He just kept trying. But, finally, as he wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which made him a success, and he was quite happy with that. And he's kind of an example of an early American marketer. He already knew how to promote himself and promote the books. So we're excited about it, and that should be out next year.
Well, we'll be excited to see it and hear about it too. So we hope you'll come back and tell us all about your next project. So I think we've had a whole bunch of questions that have come up, and we have librarian Carla Sherman is going to tell us what some of the questions from our audience are. Carla?
Hi. Actually, we've had a very quiet and engaged group this evening listening to you. I do have a question. Clybourne Park, which premiered in 2010 at the Playwrights Horizons Theater, was written by Bruce Norris, and he said he was inspired by Raisin in the Sun. We were wondering if you had any role as consultant for the play as it was being written and developed.
So we saw that early version of it at Playwrights Horizon. As I mentioned, we were always getting Google alerts, and if we could, we would race down. Because I used to live in Boston, by the way. I lived there until last year when I moved here to Middletown. And we saw it, and we talked. We had a little bit of an exchange with them. I think we all thought we would be done with the documentary around that time. But no, I had no role in that. And sometimes people ask me if we think that Lorraine Hansberry would like that play, and almost everyone I know who knows Hansberry stuff really well thinks that she would not like that play.
Okay. You had mentioned that Sidney Poitier had declined to be interviewed many times. What did you finally say to inspire him to grant you that 15-minute interview?
So I I don't think it's something that we said, but I think that we kept interviewing people that he knew, and I think it kept getting back to him. And I think over time he forgot that we had, we had asked him, because I think then he was like, well, why aren't I being interviewed? So I think that I don't think it was really me. I mean, we would periodically write and check in, but I had sort of stopped for a little while. I think the last interview we did his interview in 2011. Yeah. The last interview I did before that was Lou Gossett Jr., and that was in 2010. So it was kind of interesting. And by the way, the interview was like over an hour long, and he was very generous with his time. He was really happy. He was really delighted to participate. And he's the only person we let see the rough cut, because he wouldn't sign his release until he saw the rough cut. As I mentioned, he's very careful about his reputation. And he really liked it. And he's like, everybody should see this film. So we were very, very excited when we got that feedback from his assistant.
Okay. Who of all the interviews that you've done has had you shell shocked? Would it be Sidney Poitier, or is there anyone else that, you said that you're not a huge movie buff, so would he have been the person that you were most shell shocked by? Or
do you mean like shell shocked and as been nervous, or like surprised what they said?
I think both. I mean, it's Sidney Poitier.
I think actually the interesting thing was his interview was very easy. I was really prepared, and I took him back through his childhood and let him move forward in time, because I really wanted him to get to make the connection between his own life and his own aspirations and those of Walter Lee. Sidney Poitier, for those of you who don't know, he's from a very poor family. His family was tomato farmers in the Caribbean, and he had a thick accent when he came here. He didn't read very well. He just really made something of himself. So he did have great aspirations, which is why I think he got emotional. But I think that Harry Belafonte's interview was actually more difficult. Was difficult actually in some ways, and we were fortunate that a family friend let us use their apartment in New York, and they were very excited to have him in their house, because they were born in their 30s as well, and he's born in the 20s, but late 20s, but they were big fans, so this was like a big treat for them. But he was kind of one of those interviewees that was testing me, I think, to see if I really knew my stuff. And so, but he said a lot of things that were immediately very, very powerful, and you knew that I would have a lot of choices in the movie, and or people, he'd say something and everybody in the crew would like look at each other and go, wow. So I would say in many ways that was the most powerful and and challenging interview. I'm trying to think of who else. Yeah, I mean, Glynn Turman, who was the kid in the play, he was hysterical. He was one of the early interviews, and he was just really, fun, because he plays a lot of bad guys now on TV. He was in The Wire, and he's been in a whole lot of other things, and he'd been married to Aretha Franklin, and so that was really exciting to hear him tell these stories about what it was like as a little boy to Miss Hansberry, and also just to see this person that on the screen can be so intense and mean and scary. I just saw him in a Law and Order. Was it a Law and Order rerun? No, it was one of those crime shows, and I was just stunned at how mean he could be. He was so nice. He was so warm.
Tracy, I had a question. As a professor, what skills are you trying to give to your students regarding storytelling?
Yeah, it is storytelling, like trying to help them discover what is a story, because the challenge is that people have lots of ideas. I want to make a film about the pandemic. Okay, that's like this. What are we going to do? What can you do about the pandemic that's here within your scope of the world and today in terms of the restrictions we have? But that's the challenge, because you want a story where there's something at stake. You have an interesting character to help you, tell the story, or it's their story that is, being presented. And so helping them kind of figure that out is the goal. And then working with them to understand that everything somebody says, of course, can't be in the film, and to try to, what are the good parts, and what will really sing, and then how do you include visuals. And it's not to say that the words are first. Sometimes, the visuals can come first in the story, but that's really hard. And it's hard for everybody. I mean, we just had a screening of our work in progress on Bomb, and we got a lot of story notes. That's what happens. So I think everybody involved in filmmaking is always working on refining their storytelling skills. In fact, right now, this weekend, that's my homework. I have to read all their ideas for their film projects for the semester.
We asked you, Tracy, in part because the theme of our series that we're promoting starting this evening has been community. And so we really appreciated how this film really spoke to the issue of building and supporting a community. And it's going to be a sort of a silver thread that's going to run through all of the films that we're going to show this year. Mm-hmm. So I think we thought this was an absolutely wonderful way to start off our season. And we're so grateful that you were able to join us for this inaugural presentation. So
thank you. I mean, community was really important to Lorraine, and so I think that this is a real honor to be here this evening.
Well, we've loved having you. So I think we're going to say thank you very much to everyone, and we're going to say good night to you all.
Great, and just one more thing, if you have any more questions, you can go to our website, sightedeyesfeelingheart.com, and you can submit questions there if you have any follow-up questions. And the last thing I'd like to say, if it's okay, is that we shot like this much material. We did over 30 interviews, and only like this much is in the film. And we're going to be using the material and mixing it with some new material and create a series of short videos, so that the materials that I mentioned, that there's brand new information that no one's ever, heard among our interviews. And so instead of letting them stay on the cutting room floor and, archived away somewhere, we're going to start a new project, raising money to create a series of short videos to get the rest of the information out to the public.
That sounds great. Once again, we want to thank Tracy Heather Strain for joining us this evening, and we're very happy to have had you.
Thank you. It's nice seeing everybody.